Now, one of my favorite examples of deep forgiveness is Corrie ten Boom. And many of you are familiar with who she is, but she was a survivor of Nazi Germany, and she was thrown into a prison camp in Ravensbrück. And most of her family was killed in the Nazi prison concentration camp, and she survived. And when she was released, she had to obviously work through a ton of forgiveness towards the Nazis who had killed her family. And she wrote a book many years ago, 1971, called The Hiding Place. It was turned into a movie. And she, in the book, I just want to read a short excerpt from it, about how she was going around really as a missionary after she got out of the concentration camp. She would go around as basically a missionary, and her theme was the message of forgiveness. She is sharing at a church in 1947. She had just been released 3 years earlier. And she's sharing in a church, and lo and behold, she has an encounter with one of the very guards of Ravensbrück who had killed her family. And you talk about the message of forgiveness having to be applied. This is what she wrote. Let me just read this short excerpt. She says, "It was in a church in Munich that I saw him, a balding, heavy-set man in a gray overcoat, a brown felt hat clutched between his hands. People were filing out of the basement room where I had just spoken. It was 1947, and I had come from Holland to defeated Germany with the message that God forgives. And that's when I saw him, working his way forward against the others. One moment I saw the overcoat and the brown hat. The next, she's having a flashback, a blue uniform and a visored cap with its skull and crossbones. It came back with a rush. The huge room with its harsh overhead lights, the pathetic pile of dresses and shoes in the center of the floor. The shame of walking naked past this man. I could see my sister's frail form ahead of me, ribs sharp beneath the parchment skin. Betsy and I, that's her sister, had been arrested for concealing Jews in our home during the Nazi occupation of Holland. This man had been a guard at Ravensbrück concentration camp where we were sent." And then he speaks. "You mentioned Ravensbrück in your talk," he was saying. "I was a guard there." No, he did not remember me, she wrote. "But since that time," he went on, "I have become a Christian. I know that God has forgiven me for the cruel things I did there, but I would like to hear it from your lips as well. Ma'am," his hand came out, "will you forgive me?" And I stood there, I whose sins had every day to be forgiven, and I could not. It could not have been many seconds that he stood there, hand held out, but to me it seemed hours as I wrestled with the most difficult thing I had ever had to do. For I had to do it, I knew that. The message that God forgives has a prior condition, that we forgive those who have injured us. If you do not forgive men their trespasses, Jesus says, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. And still I stood there with the coldness clutching my heart. But forgiveness is not an emotion. I knew that too. Forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. "Jesus, help me," I prayed silently. "I can't lift my hand. I can't do that much. You supply the feeling." And so, woodenly, mechanically, I thrust my hand into the one stretched out to me, and as I did, an incredible thing took place. The current started in my shoulder, raced down my arm, sprang into our joined hands, and then this healing warmth seemed to flood my whole being, bringing tears to my eyes. "I forgive you, brother," I cried, "with all my heart." For a long moment we grasped each other's hands, the former guard and the former prisoner. I had never known God's love so intensely as I did then.